Good evening from Vietnam, Joe. Thanks a lot for spending your afternoon joining our inside sharing and share your stories with our audience. So, on behalf of the listeners, we really want to say thank you to you.
Bon dia, ha, and bon dia
Yeah.
to your listeners and viewers that are joining in. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you today.
Hey. And Joe, I know that you guys haven't been to Vietnam yet, so put that onto your bucket list. The next time you travel, we are here. We will take you around town. Okay?
I think the list of countries that I've actually paddled a canoe or kayak in is around 25 right
Ah.
now. I I would love for that to be 26, with the 26 being Vietnam. That would be super cool. So like that's kind of a neat thing about what I enjoy doing is sometimes canoeing, the river, the sea, and it gives us an opportunity to point our compass in a unique direction and have a unique experience. I think that's one of the neat things about paddling rivers. It's not just that paddling rivers and paddling on the sea is cool,
Hmm.
but it takes you like out of the big cities. It takes you to really interesting places on the planet, and you kind of get out into a more smaller towns and villages and rural areas, mountainous, sea, and I love that about paddle sports.
Hmm. And so you can combine between doing what you love and expanding the network, the cultures, understanding about the new country, meeting the new people. That's amazing, right?
Well, probably not a bad segue. I mean, we're having this conversation today. Maybe you found me partially on the idea, at least, that I had a little bit of Olympic success
Yes.
30 years ago in the sport of whitewater canoe slalom, where my doubles canoe partner Scott Strasball and I won a gold medal here in Las Salles Catalonia, the Spanish state of Catalonia, where I currently live. And that was the first and actually only gold medal the United States won and has won in canoe slalom. But when you talk about culture and you
Mm.
talk about kind of feeling comfortable where you are, I write a little story in the book I published a few months ago called Slalom that in the United States, we had this really good canoe slalom team, but the sport was anchored here in Europe.
Ah.
And so when all the races would be here in Europe. And so I remember in 1991, it was 1 year before the 92 Olympic Games, we had been traveling to a different race every weekend, a different World Cup race, and you know how you're just living out of a duffel bag, and meanwhile you get as an American athlete, you get very tired and run down, just going from campground to campground, or maybe like a hostel to hostel, and meanwhile your competitors from Europe after the race, they're able to go home for a day or two, sleep in their own bed, wash their clothes, get a meal cooked at home. But for the American athletes, you just kind of kept staying on the road.
Ah.
And so in July of 1991, it was 1 year before the 1992 Olympics,
Mm.
we had a test race here in Los Salles. It was the first time any of the athletes had been here before, so we were all looking forward to the opportunity to paddle on the Olympic canoeing course. And I remember the first day I came here, I really liked the town, but I was
Ah.
also really tired. We had been living out of the duffel bag for 6 weeks. And I remember we had driven all the way across France and we arrived into northern Spain where La Celle is. And I was really tired. And I was 21 years old. And I just had this epiphany where I just sort of sat up on my bed and said, okay, that's it. I don't want to feel like 1 year from now at the Olympic Games, I don't want to feel like an American visitor at the Olympic
Ah.
Village. Like, I want to feel a sense of belonging. I want to feel a sense of connection. And that was it. After that moment, when I went into town, whether it was to the supermarket or going to the bank or to a restaurant, the relationships went from being very transactional, like I need food, I need money, I need groceries, to really, hey, these are my neighbors now. Like these are people I'm building a connection with. And we spent a lot of time here in the year before the Olympics, about 100 days in the year before the Olympics, which is a lot. And on the day we walked to the Olympic course, on the day of our Olympic race, like that felt like mission accomplished. Like we really felt very connected to the culture here. And so I think the application to that in business or in life is that I think a lot about the work that people have to do in business. And of course, coming out of the quarantine and the pandemic and, a lot of, elements of COVID, we've been working from home for a while, but people are starting to go back out and travel and do presentations on the road. And I'm always reminded that there are ways, if you're willing to do the work, you can make the places you go, that you travel into, feel more like home. But you've really got to embrace relationships and really be excited and passionate about learning about the cultures where you're traveling. So yeah, canoeing taught me that a long time ago. And after winning the Olympics, to have had all those relationships in the community already, it just deepened all the relationships like times 10,000.
And it's important that it reminds us of the intention, right? So if we have an intention to do something, go all in and give your best intention to connect with people, connect with the community, and be a part of that. So you're not gonna, so you feel you are belonging.
Yeah, 100%.
Joe, and you are the first person, and then actually you are the 447th person joining our show in 15 months. But then you are the first person that in the space of athlete and won the Olympic gold medal. So it's a very privilege for our audience to know. Your journey and everything that making you who you are today. So allow us to travel time. All right. We want to know a younger version of Joe when you were young. What was your dream about the future, though?
It was interesting. I think a lot of people very, quickly see the result or see the title Olympic champion or Olympic gold medalist. And people automatically assume, and probably not incorrectly, that there's been this very long Olympic journey for that person that started many years ago. What's really interesting for us, and in my sport of whitewater canoeing, was our history with the Olympic program. So first of all, there is another form of canoeing on the Olympic program, the flatwater canoe sprint racing. That's been an Olympic sport since 1936. My sport, the whitewater canoe slalom, where you're navigating the river rapids and you're maneuvering between slalom poles that hang from wires above the river for time. And, it's a race of agility and precision. It's a race of agility and precision and speed. And, what was interesting is that the first time we were on the Olympic program was 1972 at the Olympics in Munich. And then it was off the Olympic program until 1992, which was the year that we were paddling. And I was 22 years old. So you ask about young Joe, there was no Olympic dream. It's just, canoeing was an activity where at 9, 10, 8, I learned when I was 8. I started to really like it at 10 for one very simple reason. I learned at summer camp, and canoeing was one of the activities at summer camp. Kayaking was one of the activities. And I was the first person in the group to learn the Eskimo roll, which is when you turn upside down in the kayak, you can ride the boat right back up without coming out of the boat. And listen, when you're 10 years old and you've never been the best at anything in sport, and you did something for the first time that other people hadn't done, I think at age 10, you that feels good. It feels good. And so, but it wasn't an Olympic dream. It's sort of, you like the feeling of the water, you like the feeling of the people, the community. and that's really kind of the real start points for me in canoeing. The Olympic thing didn't happen. I mean, to be very clear, the the Olympic the Olympic sport of canoe slalom wasn't added to the program
Mm.
until 1989. So it was just a little over 5 years before the 1992 Olympic Games. And my canoe partner and I were already getting pretty good results in World Cup, World Championship races. But yeah, it wasn't about the Olympics. I did find my way into competition, but even by not being a part of the Olympics, like you had to have a lot of reasons for enjoying what you do more than Olympic gold medals. Like the gold medal is just something that kind of comes and goes.
Ah.
But the process of improving, enjoying a sport that, is really fun to do, it always occurred to me when I was young, unlike American football, which most people are only going to play through high school, canoeing is something you can do for your whole life.
Ah.
And people are great. It has a wonderful kind of gravity type feeling to it. That's what really kind of lit me up about canoeing when I was young. But I really liked the community and the people I was paddling with, and the kind of getting to meet all the legends of canoeing when I was, 12, 13, 14 years old. That was a big deal for me.
Uh, so you're starting to know about canoeing since the age of 10, right? And then you do canoeing ever since 79. I'm sure that hobby you're gonna carry doing that for many many more years to come. So tell us, what happened in 1989, and then for you to be selected and to the U.S. team and represent to join the Olympic in 1992. Share with us that journey, please.
Yeah, again, there's like all these little steps these little steps that came along the journey.
Mm.
I was 16 years old and still in high school when I qualified for the U.S. junior national team. But I was still in high school, and a year later, when I was 17 years old and qualified for the doubles canoe team with my canoe partner Scott.
Mm.
That was our first year racing together, was at the World Championships in France. And it was a hard race, but we had some very positive things to take away. And we knew that the next World Championships 2 years later in 1989 were going to be in the United States.
Ah.
And we knew that was going to be a big deal. And so we said, okay, let's keep the partnership together in the two-person canoe. So like, unlike rowing, where a lot of the rowing teams train in one-person boats and then they come together in the team boats right before the big races,
Mm.
in whitewater canoeing, the doubles canoe athletes train all the year together in the doubles canoe.
Mm.
And so Scott and I trained together for 2 years in 1989, had a great race, the World Championships, came in fifth, and we were already starting to win medals and World Cups at that point. So that was another kind of breakthrough for us. We actually won our first ever World Cup a week later after the World Championships in Ontario, Canada. But then, I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation was that our sport is heavily anchored in Europe. A lot of the biggest races happen here. And I remember, like, even though we had been doing pretty well through the first 3 years of our career, we hadn't won a medal over here in Europe. And that kind of became a goal. And in 1990, we won a medal, a silver medal at the World Cup race in France. And like, that was another step, and then the year after that, which we expected to be like a really big run-up year, as the Olympics were approaching. I mean, this is why, you play the game. I dislocate my shoulder a year and a half before the Olympics. And I'm out of training for several months, in the spring of 1991. And so really after that, it was all about trying to recuperate, recover, build strength, and kind of get back on the track again. And using the summer of 1991, of which we were hoping to have do a lot of fine tuning with our races. None of that. It was just trying to get back, get the feeling back again. And so we had to kind of overcome that. And then the Olympic year, the Olympic trials that go along with that. And Yeah, it's all these tests and steps come up along the way. And I know this that for spectators and TV viewers who watch the Olympics, fans who watch the Olympics, we get very caught up in the results, who's going to win gold medal, who's going to win silver, who's going to win bronze. But for the athlete, there's just not, it doesn't do any good to think about the color medal you're going to win.
Mm.
You really focus on the process and you focus on, your health, the things that you can control,
Mm.
and that's it, and it's like that was one of these lessons that the river teaches you, and sometimes in a very hard and humbling way, like the dislocated shoulder. But that's why I think these are the lessons that you can learn from sport, you can learn from the river, and yeah, that was a big one for me. Very
Mm.
step by step process, Hop.
Oh. And then after that, how could you transfer that experience or the training that you got in sports and transform it into teaching people, coaching people on performance in business and life? Tell us that journey now.
Yeah, it's so interesting is that, I think when, as you start to put more time into canoeing and you start to think about like what are the techniques, what are the strategies that work to going faster on the river, I think one of the things that you have to be open to what the lessons are that the river is teaching you.
Mm.
So like you have to, this is not like a swimming pool or a track where it's like static conditions. A river is constantly changing and has like a lot of energy in it. And the one thing that you learn very, very quickly, one of the very first lessons you learn when you learn whitewater kayaking for recreation or for sport is humility.
Mm.
The river will humble you because the river doesn't stop. The river just keeps going.
Mm.
And you will need a break at some point, but the river does not need a break. And I think when you start to learn how powerful the river is, and the river just doesn't care, it's a force of energy moving.
Mm.
And I think as you realize that this is the game that you've chosen to play, this is the game in which you want to get faster and better, that you realize that it's really not about your own strength and your own power, but it's how do you tap in and align with the strength and the power of the river. And so there's a lot of letting go. There's a lot of kind of giving yourself into a force of something bigger. And that's very counterintuitive. Like, we live in this world, it's like, oh, you just need to be tougher, you need to fight it out more, you need to be stronger. But those techniques don't work very well on the river. If you try to fight against, a force of energy that's stronger than you and doesn't care,
Mm.
like you're not going to win that fight, And so there's all these kind of counterintuitive ways that, the way I sort of define slalom, which is the sport that I do, it's the pursuit of simplicity and flow.
Mm.
So those are like two performance states, simplicity and flow, in collaboration with uncertainty. Because the river is completely uncertain. Like you don't know how it's going to ultimately work out. And then you do this by using a response, your response, that is both counterintuitive and agile. So you
Mm.
have that ability to change and also really be open to something that just seems like would make no sense at all,
Mm.
but that's exactly what the river is asking of you. So kind of made simple, slalom to me is the pursuit of simplicity and flow in collaboration with uncertainty, using your agile and counterintuitive response.
Mm. Then for the river, we can see it right in front of our eyes, right? Even if it has a different path, different energies, like you say, and
Yeah,
yeah, and in life,
and the
this,
rocks, and the rocks.
yeah, and you can also see your like your rivals, rival teams, your partner in the back or in the front, whatever, right? But in life, there's a lot of things that we cannot see by our bare eyes. So how can we teach people the simplicity and the flow and go with the collaborations and uncertainties like that? Can you share further for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a couple of things in here that I'd love to dive into. So in this book that I wrote earlier this summer, it's called Slalom, and then there's sort of a long subtitle, but it's important to say it. 6 river classes about how to confront obstacles, advance amid uncertainty, and bring focus to what matters most. And the reason that's so I have these I divide the book up into six sections, and the first one is just sort of makes a case for why it defines this idea of slalom, which we just talked about. And then the next 5 classes, I think answer your question about how we teach this. And I think that the very first step is that you go from looking outside to looking inside. And I call it, the first section is called A Paddler's Energy. And so it's really about this idea of how we turn inwards and how we kind of manage the expenditure of energy and the replenishment of energy. And it's not about time, it's always about energy. And we're being aware of energy around us that we can tap into that can make our job easier. I don't want to say easier, but certainly more in a state of flow. And that ultimately that when I'm talking to business clients, coaching, performance coaching clients, the as opposed to thinking like, okay, I'm going to go to work today from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, and I'm going to work out up here at this high level all day long, and I'm just going to grit it out. And, when it comes to managing energy, really what the river is encouraging you to do is to sort of choose your places on the river to expend a lot of energy, and then choose your places where you can kind of let go a little bit and let the water do more of the work. And it's at those moments where you are recovering energy, you're replenishing energy because you're not spending it. And the way I like to think of it is that if, a lot of people will say when I'm paddling a river, oh, it's like you're barely moving the paddle through the water, like it looks like you're hardly working. And I said, all I'm really doing is letting the river do the work for me and then saving my own energy for when I get into trouble and when I really need it. But if I'm out there just paddling super hard all the time, I'm going to be depleted. And then if the boat gets into a bad situation where I've got to correct mistakes or get out of a bad situation, I won't have the energy to do it. So I think to your question, the first 2 sections of the book, one is called A Paddler's Energy, and then the next one is called River Strategy, which kind of gets into these these counterintuitive ideas of what works on the river and what doesn't. The rocks as obstacles, because as business people, we all have obstacles that get in our way. And I think paddlers, people who paddle rivers, have a very unique way of looking at rocks and the relationships that they build with rocks. And yeah, I think these are very helpful in your question about like how we go about focusing on our river, on our line on the river, what we want to do, and not worrying about the other people. I think the river is really good at teaching you how to turn inwards and manage that energy a little bit better.
I I I I heard what you say, but I have to say it a different way. Okay, Joe. There's a lot of people playing sports. All right. There's a lot of people that do it really really good at sports. But then the ability to connect between what they're good at, what they do, and bring it into, from the works that they love to do onto something that they can transfer to the next person, to the pupil,
Yes.
through the experience, through the coaching, through the training, performance, mentoring, things like that, are limited. There's not a lot of people has that capability of doing so. You are the one who got great result through the works that you do, the thing that you love to do, and being able to transfer that onto the business world life, to apply it. Tell us how you were able to make that connection between,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, first, I mean, the first thing is that, I mean, my canoe partner and I had, I'll tell you a quick story and then I'll
Mm,
sort of really answer the question more definitively. So, after the Olympic race here in Paseo, we went down to the main Olympic village in Barcelona, and then we went to the closing ceremonies in Barcelona. We were on the bus to the closing ceremonies, and so we were going to be going to the closing ceremonies, and the next day we were going to go back to the United States. And my coach said, "Okay, Joe, you've had a good Olympic Games. What are you going to do when you go home to the U.S.?" And I said, "Well, I've already started to get asked to do some public speaking engagements, and I think this is a great opportunity to travel, share the story of canoeing, and share my Olympic success with more people." And my coach said, remember, I'm only 22 years old at the time.
mm,
My coach says, "That's great. That's would be fantastic. Are you open to a little bit of advice?" And I said, "Of course, I'm open to advice." And he said, I coached Norm Bellingham, who won a gold medal in flatwater kayaking 4 years earlier
mm,
in the Olympics in Seoul, South Korea. And he goes, "I'll tell you what I told Norm, that you can go home and for the first 3 or 4 weeks, you can wear your Olympic uniform, you can put on your medal, and people will be really happy for you. And they'll be really glad to hear your story and get to know you and just learn more about what you're doing. But here's the thing, after a few weeks and the excitement of the Olympics kind of fades away, it's very human nature for people to say, well, Joe, that's great that you won a gold medal at the Olympic Games, but how does that help me? How
mm,
does your gold medal help me do better?"
mm,
And my coach paused and he said, "If you can answer that question, how you can take your experience and make other people better, he goes, you'll tell this story as long as you'd like." And I think the book that I wrote is kind of a testament to that. It's not
mm,
about me, it's not about my Olympic story, it's about your personal journey through the chaos. So basically, the answer, more technically to your question, is that for the last 30 years, I've been processing not these stories that make you say, "Look at me, look at Joe, look at Scott, look at this great thing you did," but it's like, why should other people care about this? Like, how does it help them?
mm,
And I just started to transfer. I think about all these elements of the sport, of the river, of the race that might be helpful to people that are trying to live a little better, to live a little more rich life, to build better relationships, to have more success in business, to get in better shape, to have better relationships with their families. And I've been practicing this for 30 years. My advice to young people, and by the way, you do not need Olympic success to do this exercise. All you need to do is to play any sport, and you just ask yourself, what are the things that make me able to do this sport? What are the things that have helped me to improve at this sport? What are the things that have helped me to enjoy this sport? And you make a list,
mm,
and you just take that list, and then you say, okay, it takes focus, it takes dedication, it takes consistency, it takes, the small steps forward every day. And you start to develop this ideology around your own participation in sport, whether that was as a young person playing cricket or whether that's as, a 40-year-old running 5 and 10K races on the weekend.
mm,
Anyone can do this exercise, but you take the elements that you see where you've improved, and then you say, like, what would be the business equivalent of that? Or what would be the relationship equivalent of that?
mm,
And if you get better at training this muscle, you will start to see the connection. You will start to see the transfer. I sort of had an interesting start to it because I had success at a young age. But I've also seen so many people that I've paddled with in my sport not only never won an Olympic medal, not only never won any world medal, never made a final in a World Cup race or a World Championships. And oh my gosh, Hala, like you should see the businesses that they've started using lessons that they took from paddling the river by just representing their national team in international competition. And now, even with a lot of my coaching clients, when I learn that they're runners or they're triathletes, they're not, I'm a business coach, so they're not hiring me to be better runners. But if I find that they're doing like an endurance sport, I'm really good at talking philosophically with endurance sports athletes, even if it's just a hobby. And we can extract those lessons and say like, okay, if doing a hard workout 7 days a week isn't working for you in running, why do you think that's going to work for you in business? You know, in running you need rest. Why aren't you willing to rest in business and just let the muscles recover, let the brain settle down, give yourself time to digest, you know, what you're learning in business by going for a walk in nature, just a small walk in nature. So yeah, I think it's a little bit counterintuitive to do, and you have to put a filter in around some of the noise that you're hearing, but this is very doable for anyone. And by the way, you can apply this to any creative art as well: dancing, painting, poetry, writing. It doesn't have to be just athletic sport.
Joe, and at the age of 22 years old, 30 years ago, right? And you were on top of the athletic success, and your coach came to you with that very big question. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, at that very moment, how did you take on his advice, though?
That was it. I just started when I stood in front of these audiences, and I got to tell you at the beginning, like it's very, like it's definitely kind of a rush of energy to stand in front of a big audience in all these different cities. And by the way, I mean, it's not like we came from a big sport like athletics or basketball. This was canoeing. This was whitewater canoeing. This is a sport where, you know, 99% of the time you are by yourself in nature among, you know, you have more trees around you than you'll ever have spectators. And so it's quite a rush to stand in front of people. But that was the idea, Holly. I was just thinking about what my coach said and who are these people? Like, where are they in their journey? And I would say that there was, when I would go to these speaking events, that I would do my speech, but things like many times, you know, there would be a dinner or maybe a cocktail party or something before or after the speech. And that was the best time because like I would learn about who was in the audience, like really what was going on in their town, what was going on in their city, what was it that they were trying to do. And you know, you try to listen. You know, those are your times to listen and get to know. And you get a sense for two things: someone's aspirations and their pain points. And you know, over the years, I've gotten a little bit better through my coaching work at trying to create a safe, trusting, collaborative space in which people can be open and kind of share a little bit of both. Like, you know, and by the way, that's not a push on people, but it's an invitation, it's a question, and giving people that ability to open up because, I mean, the worst is suppressing those things. I mean, especially the pain points. And because if you suppress the pain points, then you'll never really be sure about the authenticity of your aspirations. So again, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make a lot of money. That's great. But if you're not sure why, if you haven't done that deep dive of like why that's important, and like, you know, and just being clear about it. I'm not judging the why. I just think if you don't do it, you might find yourself at a place further down the road, not really sure how or why you ended up where you are, even though you ultimately did what you said you were going to do, which is have a lot of money. And this is not easy work. This is hard stuff. But this is also what I think one of the nice things about coming from a sport like canoeing, where most of my time was spent in solitude and in nature and, in these very quiet places. Yeah, nature is, I speak and I talk and write about, evolving a relationship with nature. And I look at that pretty differently today than I did 30 years ago. It's an incredible resource to sort of help us. And I've taken some of the things I've learned in my own relationship with nature to try to create those spaces with people to have more authentic conversations.
Wow. And Joe, for the athlete world, you have a different set of training, thinking, and learning, right? And
Yeah.
then now you go into another space after that where you have to acquire new skill, new learning, unlearn a lot of things, and relearn everything all over again. So tell us, how that journey that takes for you to unpack and relearn everything like that.
Well, I think the best story I can tell you, it's sort of, I have a little theme I'm doing here. I have a story and then I have my more technical answer. So I mentioned, that I'm an American. I have a U.S. passport. I haven't been to the United States in more than 3 years now. I don't have any plans to return. Nothing, nothing against the United States. I'm just very happy where I am. And I live in the Spanish state of Catalonia, in a town of 12,000 people called La Seu d'Urgell. We actually don't speak Spanish here as the first language. We speak Catalan. And everyone can speak Spanish, but we usually speak Catalan. And so I have put myself, when I made the move here 5 years ago, and it was a quality of life adventure move, that, every day I wake up and I hear this language being spoken outside of my window or outside the door. And there's always this little foggy moment, few seconds, just a few seconds, like, where am I? And what's that language being spoken? And then, like, it kind of comes into focus. I remember where I am and what I'm doing. And it becomes clear to me that, okay, surviving here and thriving in a life here is really is signing up for a life of learning. So I interact in a language that is absolutely not English and has nothing in common with English. It's a different culture with different values, especially up here in the Pyrenees Mountains where I live. I'm surrounded by these ideas. I always tell people simple, slower, and less. These are like the prevailing values. More simplicity, slowing down, and doing less and having less. And so it is very different, from a lot of people in the U.S. that have very material-driven goals and are kind of aiming for that second house up in the mountains or by the beach and working super hard and just, want a big house, big car, whatever that might be. It's just really different here. And again, I'm not judging it. I'm just sharing with you that it's different. But I just tell you that is that, we put ourselves in positions to learn and grow differently. But I think there's a second part of your, answer your question I think is a bit more subtle. I think it depends a little bit on where you are in your life. It's I recently turned 53 years old. I'm not really looking for my place in the world right now. I'm having a much more internal conversation with myself about the second half of my life. I'm having a conversation about what does it mean to be present and aware for the little small moments, and what does it mean to learn, grow, seek challenge and discomfort, and connection at this stage of life. And it's a very, there's a lot of subtraction, there's a lot of thinning down. Like, I'm not trying to add
Mm.
at this stage of my life. Most of it is subtraction, is thinning, paring down, and really figuring out what is the most important, because it can't be everything. But if you had asked me 5 years ago the same question, I might be like, oh yeah, just, I want to read one book a week, and for a year. And so I can say I read 52 books. I would much rather read one book deeply and apply the good ideas and the principles from one good book to my life than read 52 books and really not have understood something really deep about each one.
Mm.
And again, there's nothing, this is just part of the life process. So there's no judging. I'm like everyone else. I had it at a younger age, healthy ego, had just a lot of figuring out what my place in life was. And it's just a little bit different now, and so that affects the way I choose to learn, what I want to learn, and the environment. But I do know, what I can tell you about being 53 years old is that I try to be a little bit more aware when things are feeling too comfortable and just too static. And thankfully, I haven't really run into that problem at this stage of life, living in a different culture, in a different community, learning a new language, being in a relationship with someone I care about deeply that comes from here. I love that. I love that part of it, and so all those things kind of awaken learning muscles. And then, yeah, and one last thing I'll say about learning is that I'm also very attentive with who I want to learn with. So learning with Maria, taking on new activities that we can do together is so great. Like, I cannot put into words like how good that feels. Even if I'm learning something that I might have a little bit of familiarity with, a boat, a paddle. But what I don't really know and understand very well is a boat and a paddle for two people in the ocean. I don't know anything about that, but we're doing that together now. And so that becomes like a really interesting way to engage. And just like we were talking about a few minutes ago, always taking those lessons and thinking about, like, okay, what does this mean to life? What are maybe some ideas here out of what I'm learning and what I'm experiencing that might be helpful to other people as well.
Thanks for sharing the three things in your life. That's the simple, slower, and less, right? And we look at life is like the river, because you like to use the river as a metaphor, and then in that particular river of life, right? There's a lot of people out there running faster, want to do more, want to have more, and stuff like that. So it seems to me
Yep.
that you are going against the current, you go against the energy of the river. So it's a little bit contradicting with like the principle of river that you had years ago, right? So how do you feel go against the current then?
Well, it's interesting. I might challenge a little bit the idea of who's going against the current.
Maybe I
you
misunderstand.
know,
Share with me.
well, I think just because a lot of people are in the river, well, first of all, I actually do think that everyone is kind of moving downstream. I think one of the things that, if you don't, the reason I call the book Slalom, slalom is ultimately a test of agility and precision and speed. And, you get to make choices. You're not just aiming your canoe straight down the river. And, which is, by the way, if you want to do that, that's fine. Where my challenge to people come in is that if you've never been exposed to what it means to traverse back and forth across the river, the beauty, the grace, the flow that goes along with that. I'm not saying you should do that. I just think it's a good thing to, to know what it means and to put some context if you're going down the river. And, what I worry about, I don't worry that we're all going to make it down the river. We're all going to get there one way or the other.
Mm.
I think a lot of it to me is really how we're going to enjoy the water and what skills we're giving ourselves to enjoy the water a little bit more. Yes, I do things a little bit differently than I think some of the people that kind of get a little bit more attention, for their accomplishments and their achievements, and a best-selling book or starting an app that turns into millions of users, a high valuation. All that stuff is really nice and it looks really good on a LinkedIn bio. And equally, conversely, a deep spiritual internal journey. Who's going to put that on their LinkedIn bio? But who is it that really decided that one path is better than another? And like, we won't really know until we get there at the end, what the work is that we were really supposed to do and meant to do. And just because some of that work is not something that would like look very flashy on a LinkedIn profile, or headline, that doesn't mean that it's not the most valuable work that you can do in this lifetime. And it's really hard to kind of comprehend that at first, the way we've been taught, and a lot of the lessons that we've been taught. But there's also a lot of wonderful teachers out there that I think are opening ourselves a little bit more to this journey. And by the way, and I'm not prescribing anything here, I don't think there's a one right way. I'm a big believer the world needs everyone's way. Like, we need the world needs Ha to be the best version that Ha can be. And that's true of everyone. And there's not a prescribed version of getting there. I like these kind of conversations because my hope is that, by the questions that you've asked me and the things that I'm learning about you, not that we're giving anyone any rules for living or rules for business, but what we are is we're kind of holding up a mirror, holding up a lens to other people that may be following this conversation that might be able to look at their own life in a slightly different way. And they can maybe see how they're getting in their own way. Or maybe that our conversation is helping the people to see blind spots in the, that they would not have ordinarily seen if we didn't start talking about it this way. And that's really cool. Like, that's what I like about this, this day and age that we're living in, and that you are where you are and I am where I am. And somehow, I have no doubt if no one hears this conversation, you and I are going to be slightly changed people for having had the conversation. But if other people hear it and they reflect on it and they just say, oh, I hadn't really thought of my journey like that or my path like that, how great that, Ha made this conversation happen and Joe agreed to come on, and, it helped me to think differently about what I'm doing.
Wow. And that is the purpose for what we share in this conversation today, right? We are not here to teach people anything, but through the stories that you share, if anybody pick up on that one and have the moment of realization that there's something there in the conversation here that you share may be benefiting for them, so that they can have a life steering into a different directions that can be more fulfilling. That's what we want them to have. All right. So, yeah. Joe, and I want to congratulate for publishing your book. Okay, because we have a lot of executive friends, and by their retiring age, there's few things that we commonly see them share about their regrets with us, and one of that is never write a book where sharing their experience, their journey, their story and stuff. So you wrote your own book. Tell us about that. How did you end up to that journey?
Well, it's been sort of just a long process, but I tried to pick out these core themes. So that subtitle of the book includes those words, the 6 river classes. So I've got these 6 classes, and throughout the story, my Olympic journey with Scott in the doubles canoe stories come in and out about our Olympic path, that ultimately, concludes with us winning the Olympics. But you'll read these stories and you'll very clearly see this is not about my journey. This is your journey, and you feel that very quickly. That gets back to my coach's advice, and I figured out how to do that in the book. But I did just take some very core concepts from the river. We talked about a couple of them, defining slalom, a paddler's energy, river strategy, and then the last three I'll share very quickly. The next one is relationships bound by water. And so here I talk about really the amazing people in this kind of counterintuitive ways that they went about building something special that helped a lot of people, that maybe it's a business. In a couple of cases I profile a couple of paddle sports businesses that you never would have thought would amount to what they became, and they never had traditional business plans. So I share this idea of relationships bound by water and why they're special, and also why they're impermanent as well. And then maybe the most popular or responded to river class in the book, the section is called The Art of Course Correction. And so really here I'm just talking about all the ways that we respond to making mistakes, and how we go about practicing building a culture for making mistakes, so that we're not just thinking about our ideal selves and our ideal performance. But I can tell you, I've said this very often about our own Olympic gold medal winning performance. I've never, ever in 30 years said that we were the fastest, the biggest, or the strongest. None of those things. The only things that we did differently than our competitors on the day of the Olympics was we corrected mistakes a little bit more efficiently, a little bit more quickly than our competitors, and we anticipated mistakes before they happened a little bit better than our competitors. That's it. And that didn't just amount to a nice day on the river. It actually amounted to winning the Olympic Games. And so I think it's very undervalued in this idea of course correction. And then the final section of the book, the last river class, is called The Practice of Transition. Because what the river is always teaching us is that it's always changing. The river around the bend always looks a little bit different than it did where you are now. And I think, and this, not to be morbid or anything, but I also touch on this idea of, of beyond, of the end of life, that's a transition, that we're preparing for as well, depending on where you are in your life. But just in general, day to day, when you're paddling a canoe or kayak on the river, you never take more than 3 or 4 strokes in a straight line before you turn. And then you're never turning for more than a few strokes before you're paddling straight again. So you're always transitioning between, straight ahead speed and turning. And just like riding a bike or driving a car or ice skates, how you manage your energy, which is, one of the river classes, through a turn, is huge. It's everything. You can, and I think as you practice transitions, this is usually where we get lost. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling like where you go to bed feeling great one night, but you wake up the next morning feeling bad. Or maybe you go to bed feeling bad and you wake up the next morning feeling great. There are some elements of transition, and pretending like that we're in some permanent state or that we're at a destination, this is a hard one for the human brain to work with, especially as the human brain is, chasing security, safety, belonging, connection, safety. Yeah, and so these are the river classes, and it just became very easy to sort of align the stories with the principles. And, and then you just sort of step back and you're just like, all right, what am I missing here? And I'm like, okay, I like what I got here and I'm going forward with this. And that became the book.
Wow.
It's been amazing. It's been a great experience.
I think that you have a very, very beautiful transition. So and you also be able to put it on a book so that it can help the people who the readers around the world, if they can pick up the book and have themselves to make course corrections, preparing for that transition, because we all gonna go to the point where we have to make transition in our lives, right? So if we
Yeah.
can accept it, we can anticipate it earlier, we can get ourselves ready for it, and embrace it to happen. Actually, we're gonna have a very beautiful transition in life that make us more fulfilling, though. So.
Well, how I would even, I sort of put my own life under my own microscope that I do in the coaching practice. And so one of my really big ideas is that whenever there's something that that's really important to us, maybe it's something we want to change, or maybe it's like getting, a presentation we have to make to a client that could really like change our life in a pretty dramatic way. And what I always do is that I always think about like, well, what are the muscles that we use to do like to improve something that's really big or make like a big transition. And then I just sort of identify those muscles, just like I was lifting weight in the weight room, and figure out these really small, tiny, incremental ways to exercise those same muscles. And so I started to do this with transitions. Like, don't wait until the big transitions to practice transition. So now, I developed a little like weekly planner, a little template for my weekly planner that I use, where I literally write out all the transitions that I'm anticipating in the course of a week. Whether that's like just today, I went from Maria's house in Yeda this morning to my house in Laseo this afternoon. And I don't want to oversell this as like this big deal. It's an hour and a half in the car, and I do this normally every week. But when I anticipate that transition, a couple of things. I can sort of leave, Yeda and Maria's house with a little bit more grace and a little bit more calm and a little bit more love and respect for the relationship that I'm in. And I can anticipate this conversation that I knew I was going to be having with you as well. And all I did was acknowledge this as a transition point in the week. And I did this over the weekend so that like nothing caught me out by surprise today. And this is a great way, the same muscle that I use to anticipate this little transition of driving an hour and a half from Yeda to Laseo. This is the same muscle that we use when we're presented with a potential career change or a position opportunity, and we're thinking, oh, do I want to move to a new country and start a new job, or because the stakes are different, but the muscle that we're using to process the transition and decide whether it's a good idea, it's the same muscle. It's that same muscle. So when we start to figure out how to practice, using that same muscle in really small transitions, you'll get better at using that muscle when it's time to make the big ones.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. Do you know that we schedule our talk for 1 hour, and then we 5 minutes past it already, and then I'm still having three big questions I want to ask you. You still have time for that, Joe?
Let's do it.
All right, thanks for that. So, my wife and I, we are in the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because both of us believe that the ability to think these days for people actually is diminishing, it's not increasing at all. And every chance that we talk to people, the experts, they're good at what they do, like you are, we ask this question: Joe, how have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think?
I have a little, certainly in the most basic, I think I'm not very good at meditation, but I've been doing it every day for, 11 or 12 years. And I think that, again, I don't want to be tactical about this because it's not tactical at all. I just sort of feel myself, the ability to give myself a chance to be more present in the moment, to be more aware. That's it. I think that's been helpful. but it's
Mm.
not tactical. Like I hate the question, oh, like how does it feel when you meditate? Or like, oh, I tried meditation for a week and it's like I feel this or I feel that. Like I don't care about any of those things.
Yeah.
It's just trusting the process, and I know over time, I've noticed a different disposition, and I recognize that we all have human brains. It's
Mm.
like the example of going to sleep feeling one way and waking up another.
Mm.
We don't have full control,
Mm.
and so really, the part two of your question is that I think a lot about what my thoughts are resisting,
Mm.
and if I can summon the awareness to be more present with what I'm resisting and lean into what I'm resisting and accept it and notice it and observe it, I can make better choices based on that. That's been
Oh,
huge for my thinking.
wow. So pay attention to what resisting for you, inside of you, and then leaning into that, embrace that, and learn from it is one way. Another way is
It,
meditation. Give yourself, be fully present at what at the moment, and trust the process of it.
But I'm bad. Like I will just say, like I'm not that. I'm not. Tim Ferriss calls it the monkey brain. The monkey in your brain with the symbols, cling, cling, cling. That's what meditation feels like to me most of the time. Like I'm thinking about things. But the thing about meditation is that you think about how to come back to letting go of those thoughts, and doing it gently and not having this fight with yourself. Well, why can't I just be calm? Everyone else seems to be doing it. No, they're not. Everyone is on their own journey, and so yeah.
And that's this. I have a huge admiration for your discipline, because you've been doing that for 11, 12 years. Even if you're not good at that, but you're very tolerant for your own self in doing the things.
Trust the process.
Trust the
Yeah.
process, right? Hey,
Trust the process.
the other question is about you moving back to the town that you won the Olympic medal, right? The gold medal.
Yeah.
What brought you back to where you won the medal 30 years ago, where you can be anywhere in the world? Why that place?
Yeah, it's a very fair question. I just, one of the things that's nice about our sport of canoeing is that because of the sport's popularity in Europe, you make a lot of good friendships with people over
Mm.
here. It's one of my favorite parts about living, here in Europe. And my experience in Marseille was no different. I knew some people here and had some friendships with people here, and that helped. But one thing I want to be clear about is like I didn't come here to relive any past success. That doesn't help me at all, and I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not. Of course, I haven't completely disassociated success at the Olympics from what I do and my identity, but it's a lot less than it used to be. And most of what I'm doing here is I'm learning, growing, challenging. I don't spend a lot of time at the canoeing channel these days. But I'm really glad to be here, and I'm just challenged by learning. And I really enjoy the Pyrenees since moving here. Two new activities that I've taken up athletically are the mountain trail running, which
Ah.
I love running in the Pyrenees, and also in the wintertime, it's the cross country skiing is really nice here too. And I love that. That really speaks to, developing my relationship with nature. And it's also a great way to see the area and to really realize that all those years I was canoeing here, that all these other things existed here and I didn't know about. I get to find out now what that's all about. So it's cool.
Yep. Yep. And I'm happy for you. I think that's part of the transition that happened in your life, also attracting you to go back. That's there's a lot of things we do in life that we don't have an answer for that. So as long as you're happy, and then you give the best out of that of what you do, that's it. And then the dots will be connected back one day, and then you see the result why everything when it comes, right.
Yeah.
Joe,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, it's not that I'm so connected to the town where I am, but I'm connected to Catalonia and the spirit here. I've had some very deep, almost spiritual type experiences in other places here in Catalonia that weren't in Loseo
Mm.
since I lived here, and I'm very aware of that. And yeah, but I love being in Catalonia right now. It's a great base, and I'm just you cannot imagine how grateful I am for the richness that Catalonia has brought into my life, people it's brought into my life, and yeah, I love being.
And then it all started because of you also, Joe. 30 years ago, when you spent 100 days there for the training, remember?
Yeah,
You told yourself that you're gonna, embrace it and start to learn everything that you could be in the town. And that proactiveness actually lead the way, lead the change somewhere in there along the way.
it's so true, and you know, yeah, you have to be very mindful about what you think about, what you kind of ask for in your thoughts, what you sort of set, because yeah, if you're if you're not clear, you're not clear. You never know how those thoughts might manifest. It may be much more than actually just going and spending a summer over there for the Olympic Games, but it could become your next home.
Yep, never know, right? Joe, I would like to ask you the last questions. So we knew your past, we knew what you're doing now, and we want to head into the future a little bit. Is there anything that you are doing, Joe, that exciting, and you want to share with us in advance so that we can celebrate with you now?
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, I've so enjoyed the process of writing and publishing and launching a book, and but I'm excited to be getting back a little bit to writing as well. I'm sure there will be. My feeling, I shouldn't say I'm sure. My feeling is there will be more books coming in the future, which will be cool.
Mm.
The other thing is sort of for where we are, related to the pandemic. Something I'd been working on prior to the pandemic was doing live adventure retreats here in Catalonia. And
Mm.
so I'll do my first one in June of 2023. We're still putting the itinerary together for that, but it will certainly involve some kayaking in the sea, a lot of great Catalan culture, and some coaching as well. Time in nature, time with good people, time eating good food. So that's something to look forward to in June of 2023.
Wow, I'm excited for you in advance. So I hope that you have all the support of the resource of the clients that will join you in that retreat journey, and then you're gonna have good memories together. You're gonna have a good friendship built from there, and that can stand in for a long period of time. All right. Uh,
Thank you.
Joe,
Thank you
thanks a
so much.
lot for spending your afternoon joining our in session show and share your stories with our audience. I'm amazed for what you are, all of your achievements, and then I really admire what you are doing now. I hope that one day we're gonna be able to see you in person. Either we come to your place if we travel there, or if you and Maria and her cousin decided to travel to this part of the world, we are here. Okay.
I look forward to that. Thank you so much, Ha, and thank you for what you're doing with these interviews. I've had the chance to go and watch a few of them, and you're doing good work. Keep it up, my friend.
Thank you very much, my friend. Yeah, I need to say goodbye to you for the time being. Let's keep in touch more, okay?
All right. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.